So tonight, Joseph Robinette Biden just gave his State of the Union address. And I'm going to bring in a friend tonight, and we're going to go over this whole address. Let's see how we make this happen. Let's make this happen. Hello, Josh, can you say something?
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. Hey, I'm not able to hear you, but let me see if I can fix that. I'm sure the people can hear you. And it's just my stuff here. Hold on one moment while we make this happen. But man, did we have a very interesting State of the Union this evening. Biden went over a bunch of different things that he decided were super awesome. All of us might not necessarily agree with, but president, and you can give your own State of the Union. You could probably fill it full of whatever you would like to, whether it's true, not, or whether people don't even believe you because they already know better. Very, very interesting. We did have a full House session today. As far as Congress goes, know that the last State of the Union was not everybody. Usually they bring both the House of Representatives and the Senate together at the same time. And we know that did not happen last year because of COVID, and they said concerns over security. Give me 1 second while I try to fix my speaker so I can.
All right.
All right, so I just hooked up 2 different speakers, so if one doesn't work, one of them is going to work. We're going to make this happen. All right. Josh, can you say something for me?
Testing 1, 2.
All right.
All right, we're back.
Fantastic. I can hear you. So, Josh, tell the people who you are, what you do, and why you're interested in politics.
So I have a very long road, so I will try and keep it very concise. So first of all, my name is Josh, obviously, as we all know now. And basically, I started out, actually, very interesting story. I started out at Nazareth College back in, I believe it was 2020 to 2021. Got involved with some campaign work. And then in 2020, 2021, some more campaign work. 2022, I also did some more campaign work. But in addition, I went and basically I moved to Washington, D.C., where I'm at now. And I went to the George Washington University's Legislative Affairs Master's Program, which honestly is a wonderful program, I would say. And in addition to, I also interned with Congresswoman, and I am not afraid to say it, Nicole Maliotakis of New York District 11. So Nicole was there, so kudos to Congresswoman Maliotakis. And I'm about to be interning with a new Congresswoman, Congresswoman Lori Chavez de Ramir. So very excited to be here as well.
All right. Now, what originally got you into politics?
So what's funny is I ended up taking a political web quest in 2016 about political parties and kind of where I'm at. Well, ironically enough, I found out that I was a Republican after, I thought that I was being a Democrat, but turns out I was wrong. So I was I was very happy to get involved in the 2016 election and just to really get a grasp on, I've seen a lot of the issues that this country is facing, and there is so much that has to be done. And honestly, I think that with our candidates running this year, I think we're going to be able to accomplish a lot. So that's kind of my little backstory.
Fantastic. So, wow, man, I did you get a chance to watch the whole thing?
I watched the entire thing, and I gotta say, first of all, President Biden called Speaker Pelosi the greatest speaker of the House. Nancy Pelosi is not the greatest speaker of the House. Nancy Pelosi ended up closing all the House and Senate office buildings and closing the Capitol to the People's House of America. In the first week of January, Speaker McCarthy ended up opening the House and Senate up and said that it would never close again. How can Nancy Pelosi be called the greatest speaker of all time if she ordered an official closing of the United States Capitol, which is the People's House? How is she the greatest? How is she the greatest speaker of all time? I don't understand that.
Well, you know, I mean, I think that there was really a lot of sanctimonious stuff going on during that whole event. I saw him actually give kudos to McCarthy, and I saw him lick the boots of the Ukrainian ambassador. So he said quite a few things that we both know and many other people know are not true. For instance, the thing about Paul Pelosi, how Paul Pelosi is such a hero who was attacked by someone who shared the same type of ideology that January 6 people did, even though this man lived in a hippie commune, was pro LGBTQ alphabet people. He was also an illegal Canadian alien, and according to his own children, was a sex slave for the Pelosi family. So it's very interesting that Joe Biden decided that he is a hero. And and I don't mean to laugh about his injury, because it's messed up when anybody gets assaulted. But I mean, honestly, like, we know that what Biden just said and preached to the whole United States of America and the rest of the world was categorically false. So I agree with you, Josh. He's told some tall tales this evening. What do you think was your one major takeaway that you might be able to agree with?
Honestly, the fact that the only thing that I agree with, honestly, is really, I would say, the fact that, yes, we do need to come together. I agree on that. But there is a limit to coming together. We have seen that Democrats want to ban assault rifles, which he said tonight. Hence the assault rifles ban of 2021. He said with immigration, he wants to open the borders, and that illegal immigration, the rate is down.
He did say that.
But
wait, let's clarify what he said. He said over the last 2 months, he just passed legislation, which I don't know what legislation he's talking about, so he sounds crazy, but that limited the Haitians, Venezuelans, and Cubans from coming into the country, and it took down their numbers about 75%, which did not reference the rest of the immigration or the total number of peoples actually coming in. That was an interesting thing there.
And in a NBC News article, it came out, obviously it's a couple months old, but I think it still pertains, that in fiscal year 2022, 2.76 million illegal immigrants arrived in this country.
Many, many, many times larger than the population of Wyoming, which is only about 500,000 people. So my whole county has 750,000 people in the county where I live. So that is an exorbitant amount of people that are coming into the country illegally. And he said something about comprehensive immigration reform.
Yes.
I want to get back to what you were talking about with the firearms afterward. But he said something about comprehensive immigration reform. Have you heard about this comprehensive immigration reform he's proposing?
Comprehensive immigration reform is a farce statement. Comprehensive immigration reform means we're going to grant them all amnesty We're not going to agree with any sides. We're going to do what we want. That's what comprehensive immigration policy is. In his mind, that's the definition of it. He wants to grant asylum. He wants to, he talked about, the fentanyl crisis. But President Biden, there's a huge amount of fentanyl that's coming in this country illegally. It came in the 11th Congressional District of New York in Brooklyn and Staten Island, and it's still furthering increasing, and you haven't done anything about it. So in his mind, comprehensive immigration reform means we're going to grant them all amnesty, even though we've put people at the border and increased border security. We're still going to let everyone in. So
now let's talk. You have one more thing to say, and then I'm going to jump in on you.
Which is it? Do you have enough people at the border, or do you have a border crisis?
Well,
there's no in between.
According to Biden, and this is interesting because he said that. We'll start off with the first part of what you said. According to him, he wants to grant everybody that is a DACA recipient amnesty, okay, and give them citizenship at the same time. Now, the interesting takeaway from that, additionally, he said, was he would like to grant the temporary farm workers amnesty as well and citizenship. Now, here's the interesting thing. The temporary farm workers are mostly migrant workers. They come here to work and then they leave and go back home. Their intention is not to stay in this country. For the temporary farm workers, their whole concept is to make money for themselves to take it back home. That's what they do. That's their lifestyle. This is him trying to say that, oh, these people want this. I wonder, has he ever asked the people that do the migrant work, is that what they want, or do they appreciate the ability to work here and then go back to their country where their family and friends and cultural roots and ties actually are? I wonder, did he actually ask anybody? I can guarantee you he didn't. He didn't even mention the rest of the illegal immigrants that we're having such an issue with. The uneducated, the undereducated, the ones that don't speak the language, the ones that have no conceptualization of the way in which we interact socially in America. There's no conversation of that. He's just like, oh, let everybody that's here be here. And that's kind of, well, for me, I already disagree with it, but that's kind of disingenuous, because how are we actually helping these people? And if you're going to do that, what about all of the people that are on refugee waiting lists that have been there for years, that aren't able to escape out of their countries and come into our country? It's a very pricey thing. You're talking about many times thousands to tens of thousands of dollars. So people, they either have thousands of dollars to help get themselves here, or they don't have that money, and then they end up in either indentured servitude, okay, sex slavery, or any number of other things. And sometimes they're even sold off for their organs or other things. It's very, very concerning that he also said, well, we've got a bill outside of the comprehensive immigration to supply the border with more staff and with more equipment. Where is this bill? Where has it been? Because the Border Patrol have been begging for this. We've seen multiple different border states step in with their National Guard, DPS, and other branches of law enforcement, including the Texas Rangers and more, to actually try to stem the flow, going as far as putting up makeshift barriers and using shipping containers, because they do not have what would you call them? Any border blocks. They don't have, there is no wall, right? We paid all this money for the wall. We've got all the materials down there, and they just stopped construction. Now, for me, I have no affinity for the concept of the wall. I have a much better plan for it than that. I think the wall should actually be on the south of Mexico, but that's a whole nother conversation, because most of the people come from that triangle section outside of Mexico. It's not actually the Mexicans coming into America, which is another conversation that needs to be addressed. But to go back and touch on what you said about the him talking about a ban on assault weapons, right? So Biden had this guy that I guess is the owner of the dance studio or something, which was shot up during the Lunar Festival. He did not mention that it had anything to do with the CCP and their smuggling rings, okay, in relation to the triads and the gangs. It was a trucking it was a trucking company that got shot up, and in relation to a farming situation, that were the places that were shot, and it was very clear that it had to do with either illegal smuggling or other illegal activity. Now, he made many references to semi-automatic pistols, semi-automatic pistols, semi-automatic pistols, and then immediately said we should ban assault weapons. Now, what they've been considering assault weapons, which we don't consider them that because we know better, and they know better too. They're just using tricky language. What they've been referring to are semi-automatic rifles, okay? This is what they've been specifically talking about, things that we would consider AK-47s, M16s, stuff like that. But whenever they talk about it, they talk about the most popular hunting rifle, okay? The AR-15, okay? Or as Biden likes to call it, the AR-14 or the 16, depending on the day, if he can keep his numbers straight. I think that it's very concerning that he kept saying semi-automatic pistols, and then ban assault weapons, because it's as if he's saying that semi-automatic pistols have now been considered assault weapons. My very large issue with that is almost every single firearm is semi-automatic. What is he talking about? Does he want us to go back to using flintlocks, which in New York State, you can't even use those? And does he want us to go back to single shots? What is he talking about, really? What are your thoughts on semi-automatic pistols?
So
which
I just looked up the bill. It's actually the bill I was referring to is HR 1808. It's the assault weapons ban on 22. And it basically, the paragraph, and I just took a skim at it, it says in section 4, it says paragraph 1, which basically says it's unlawful for a person to import, sell, manufacture, transfer, or possess in or affecting interstate or foreign commerce a semi-automatic assault weapon. And then it goes on and says paragraph 1, which is what I just read, shall not apply to the United States or Department of Agency or the United States. Goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And then it says, for purposes of law enforcement, and it goes on and on and on and on. And then we see the sale to, transfer to, and possession by a campus law enforcement officer for purposes of law enforcement, whether on or off duty. So technically, it's not even an assault weapons ban. It's a semi-ban because it's only allowed for these people and not allowed for these people. So in a way, that whole bit, number one, he contradicted himself. Number two, if you go look at the bill even contradicts itself. HR 1808. Check it out, congress.gov. I encourage everyone to go check it out. In addition to all that information, he's basically saying we're going to take the Second Amendment right away. Now, from 2020 onward, hasn't the American people suffered enough? Haven't we had our rights taken away enough from COVID-19 and the Biden administration's partake in that, and the ineptitude of other organizations such as the CDC to handle that? I mean, we have lost so many freedoms during that pandemic alone. You know, you can go on and on about it. But now we want to further impose on your freedoms and take away your right to own a weapon. But the Second Amendment says a right to a well-regulated militia shall not be infringed on, blah, 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 blah. So that is completely contradictory to the Second Amendment. Government mandates, government mandates, government, that sort of thing. Having mandates are not the answers. And that's what Democrats have wanted for so many years on the federal level. And that's what we have endured, is mandate after mandate after mandate. But so, these mandates are hurting us.
They're hurting us very, very seriously. And it's interesting. I'm trying to find the exact quote because I wrote it down earlier. But basically, he said something similar to the fact that we as a nation have laws and rights, and we should uphold everybody's rights, was something, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, was something that he said. Now, he's taking away our rights, which are in the Constitution. Now, I had this conversation with somebody last night about the Second Amendment and what it's there for, and well-regulated militia, and how all of that actually translates into practicality. The interesting thing surrounding this concept is a well-regulated militia versus your ability to own a firearm to create your own militia in a time of need. So the question is there then, are you saying that the Second Amendment sets up independent, non-governmental militias to continue to be standing currently? Because if that is the conversation, then I have a lot of questions about what the ATF, the FBI, and other alphabet agencies have done over the years to break up all of these different militias, because they like to use the terminology, they are anti-government. But the whole concept of the founding of our country is that we need militias to, if our government acts up, flip the government over. This is the whole concept. We're supposed to be able to have firearms in the time of need to create a militia, not that we are supposed to continuously have standing militias. I mean, shoot, if you want that, that opens up a lot of questions, comments, and concerns I might have. But I'm not against that either. But it seems as though the government is directly against that. And I don't believe that they can say, oh, well, we'll take away firearms for this certain group of individuals, which is literally everybody that's not the government. You know, that is extremely dangerous. That's what the forefathers were concerned about. That's why we have the Second Amendment, and that's why it's there. The conversation goes that if they only had flintlocks and stuff back then, well, we should only make it for people to have that. I say, you know what? Absolutely fair conversation to have. But if everybody else gets flintlocks, so should the government. The concept of the Second Amendment is that we should have equal access to armaments for our own protection and the individual sovereignty of us as the sovereign individual. So it's just their standpoint on what they've got going on with these firearms that they want to take away is just a very, very fast road to what we saw happen in Australia or New Zealand right before you briefly mentioned COVID. Right before the COVID situation, they took away everybody's firearms. And then after that, they locked them all in internment camps. They locked them up in internment camps. You guys, if you're listening, you can go look this up. This isn't a hidden fact. These are real facts. Even though the information might be a little scuttled, you can still go look this up. Our neighbors to the north, Canada, started by saying, oh, we're banning assault weapons, right? They started by saying that. And then everybody's like, no, you're going to take all of our guns. And Justin Trudeau, pretty boy Justin Trudeau, you know, of the WEF, the Young Global Leaders. What's the program called, Josh? Do you remember?
I do not, but I know what you're talking about.
But Jacinda Ardern, who was the Prime Minister of New Zealand, recently resigned because she stole somebody's child. Okay, the government stole somebody's child, which is a whole separate conversation. We're not going to get into that. But she's been taking a lot of flack, especially about the internment camps and stuff too. But Justin Trudeau, after taking away the what they said were assault weapons, then came for hunting rifles. Then they came for handguns, and they've recently banned the sale or purchase of handguns. So effectively, you cannot own a firearm or purchase a firearm in Canada. Now, they started off, and this is what we see. They start off saying one thing, and then it goes and it goes and it goes. And they say that it's not a slippery slope and that it's a slippery slope fallacy. But it seems every time we start to go down these slopes, it gets slippery and more slippery, and they continue to take away all the rights. What's the quote about? It goes something like, a government is fast to take away the rights, but it really takes armed revolution to actually get your right back. Something like that, Josh. I'm paraphrasing greatly.
Well, and to go off of your point, the quote that Biden said was, quote, "Our nation is working for more freedom, more dignity, and more peace, not just in Europe, but everywhere," end quote. This was when he was talking about Ukraine. But clearly that's not true.
Well, he doesn't seem to care very much so about the rights of the American people, which has for a long time been a grave concern I've had about him.
Here's another quote. Quote, "Here in the people's house, it's our duty to protect all the people's rights and freedoms," end quote.
Yes. Yes. So it's interesting that he says that, and then in the next breath talks about taking away rights and liberties. You know, another interesting thing about this was he said that some Republicans, which he's not naming any Republicans,
yes,
want to get rid of Medicare and Social Security. And excuse me, this is very important. Let me change my words. They want to sunset Medicaid and Social Security, because that's different than get rid of. That's a very important point. But he said that Republicans want that. No Republicans want that. When he said that, the Republican side had an uproar. There were boos, and I believe it might have been Marjorie Taylor Greene who shouted liar at him. And because it's a lie, it's categorically false. No Republicans have said that, not one. And he says that he wasn't going to name any because he can't name any, because nobody has said and or proposed that. But what I can tell you as a matter of fact, both on the state level of the state of New York, okay, because it's been under Democrat rule, one-party rule for quite some time, under Cuomo's reign and under Kathy now, they have cut Medicaid, okay, multiple times, at least three times now that I can remember in recent thought, okay. Under Biden, the Democrats have already pushed to cut Social Security. Under Obama decided to raid the Social Security Trust, and the CBO said, don't do that. Social Security is already on schedule to be completely empty by 2025. This is what the CBO said, the Central Budget Office. That's their job. The numbers are their job. I would think that they know what they're talking about.
Well, not for nothing, the Congressional Budget Office, it's super bipartisan. And it works with both Democrat and Republican offices. I have not had the pleasure of working with the Congressional Budget Office, unfortunately. I would actually like to see where they're located and what they do. At some point, I plan to do that. But they work on the Senate and the House side, both with Democrats and Republicans. Every bill that goes through, CBO takes it, they analyze it, and they give the breakdown of the budget. And then whoever wants it, they can send it off to different offices. And CBO is very helpful for that. What Biden says and what CBO says are two completely different things. And I would love to know what CBO is thinking after watching this. But, we won't know because they're bipartisan, which I 100% respect that. But CBO is a great resource. I will say I've used it plenty of times for analyzing bills and legislation, and the numbers don't lie.
Yeah, it's true. It's very interesting. He said another couple of things. He said he talked about the jobs and how many jobs he created, and how strong the economy is. And it was interesting that he mentioned that how strong the economy is and everything's going so great. But if you're a normal, general, everyday person, individual, nobody would agree with that. Democrat or Republican, nobody would agree with everything is fantastic and he's done such a great job with the economy. I don't know exactly why he would say that, aside from sheer bluster, but it was great puffery of him to say such a thing and then try to sell it to the American people as if it was true. Like what I'm experiencing in life, what you're experiencing in life, what you see with your eyes, what your family and friends tell you, like that's not happening. Like he's completely disregarding everybody else's life experiences when we know that he himself has been extremely entitled his whole life. So it's as if he has become, or maybe it's even just on purpose, is so far out of touch with the everyday man and person he's supposed to actually represent. He just says stuff out of his mouth that he thinks is going to make him look good. He said, and this is a quote, the middle class has been hollowed out. Yes, Biden, the middle class has been hollowed out largely by yourself and the policies that you've been pushing since you've gotten into office that have caused inflation to skyrocket, which he said that he's bringing down inflation, which I haven't seen. Okay, I've only seen things continue to increase.
I have numbers on that.
You have numbers on that? Go ahead.
I have numbers. 2021 inflation was 7%. In 2022, it was down 6.5%. Okay, so that's 0.5%. That's not a big number. That's not a big number. Furthermore, unemployment rate in August of 2022 was 3.7%. January 2023, it is 3.4%. So, okay, numbers have gone down slightly, but not enough.
So now here is the question, because I watch the CBO greatly. I really appreciate what they do.
I do too.
I love it. I love information. And it seems as though the recategorization of inflation, how it's calculated and stuff like that, has created these artificially low inflation numbers. Because look at eggs, right? Eggs were high before we all of a sudden had this egg crisis. Look at the price of milk. Look at the price of bread. So what do we calculate inflation off of, if not the goods that we purchase that would be considered staple goods that everyone purchases? Clothes are up. Electronics are up. House and cleaning supplies are up. All of these things are up, and not just up. They are up considerably over 3, 5, 6, 7%. Almost everything is up across the board, 20+%. Meat, vegetables, everything since he's taken office. And it's concerning. It's concerning that they try to use this artificial number when we see that what we're witnessing every day is not the same numbers. It's crazy. He also said that gas is down $1.
Don't even get me started on that. No, it's not. Don't even get me started. Let's look up the average price of gas in Cali right now.
It's interesting, you know, because he also referenced the oil companies not putting enough investment into the oil industry because they said they don't know that they won't get rid of all oil production, talking about Biden, his administration, and the government. But they've said many times that their goal is to get rid of all oil production and everything. They've instituted, what would you consider them? They've instituted guidelines, and that's not the perfect word, but it's a good word for it. Guidelines to make it so that banks no longer loan money for research, for oil and gas, for stuff like that, for exploratory research, or fund any new refinery projects. So he's saying this while at the same time he is doing something completely different than what he is actually saying.
The average price of gas in California right now is $4.62 per gallon. I'm just rounding up. And under the IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act, that was supposed to bring gas prices down. It never did. Joe Biden all the time has been saying that the Inflation Reduction Act brought gas prices down, brought this down, fixed the economy. The only thing that the Inflation Reduction Act did, the only reason why it was implemented, is to throw billions of dollars to support climate change initiatives. I have no problem with climate change initiatives, but not right now. Right now, we have a failing economy. We need to get that back in track and maybe slowly start integrating climate change initiatives. Completely understand that. But to just do full scale, go ahead and just do climate change 100%. We can't afford to do that right now, Joe. That's the only reason why you passed the Inflation Reduction Act was climate. It had nothing to do with inflation, despite the name, despite what's in the bill.
Yes.
It didn't decrease inflation. It didn't decrease house prices. It didn't decrease food prices. And if you wanted food prices, I think I have that somewhere here. No, I don't have it. I thought I did.
I'll give you a second to pull that up because I want to reference what you were just saying. So, Bill, this is a quote from him directly. The Inflation Reduction Act is also the most significant bill ever in climate change. So that's where he stands on that. We know that the government has a tendency to name these bills for things that they don't actually represent just to get the public on their side, and then they fill it full of a whole bunch of trash. And it's very interesting when we start talking about specifically climate change and related initiatives to that, because we do, as you said, we have a serious energy issue in this country. Biden admitted that out of his mouth in the State of the Union, and he said we're not going to be able to get rid of gas and stuff for the next 10 years or so. And he was hooted and hollered at by his own people, by the Dems. They did not like that he said that at all. They did not like that he mentioned that the oil companies were not investing in more exploratory research and building refineries and production either. So now it seems that there is a stark difference between what he believes and what his party, the majority of them, that were in there, that were seated in there, actually believe. So if he is supposed to be the leader of them, what is your concept of how he can get them to see that that isn't so bad, even though this is the same guy that has been pushing for ESG regulations?
I found that, so in January 2021,
yes,
food prices were up 3.9%. In August 2022, they were, is my graph gonna, 13.5%. Really, Joe? Really?
Right.
Food prices have decreased? Really?
And that's an average, because the numbers for a lot of food are much higher. Like meat, I remember in August was about 23% was up. And I can't even recall the other numbers off the top of my head, but I like to. I'm a carnivore, That's important to me. And you want us to all eat bugs, Joe? I'm not with it, or your lab grown meat. I've actually seen them produce the lab grown meat. It's a horrifying Frankensteinish-esque thing that they do, and it's like the meat is desperately trying to be a living organism, and it's the saddest thing I've ever seen in life. Like I feel for that. It's not even a complete organism. That's what's so sad about it. It's like it's trying to live. You've got, I don't know if you've actually seen any of that it's not artificial meat, right? It's lab grown meat. But the lab grown meat, it's so sad because it looks like it's struggling to try to be alive, and it's not a complete organism. It's terrible. So when it comes to food and production and stuff like that, he did mention that we have to bring back production to the United States. He did say that multiple times, and he said something like, nowhere is it written that Americans can't be number one in manufacturing. So that was interesting that he said that, and I agree with that. I'm an America first person. I believe we should prioritize us. He did say one very interesting thing. He said he's going to make it for all federal projects, and let's see if this happens, because we know it doesn't always happen when they say that. He said that all federal projects are going to have to be done with materials that were made in the United States, and then he referenced lumber, which was interesting because we all know how much they've stifled the lumber industry, which is a whole nother conversation. Have you gone to see how much a piece of plywood costs now compared? Can you pull that up? The increase in cost of lumber, because that's it's just astronomical, and it goes into so many other costs, including housing, amongst other things. So when we talk about saying, oh, we're going to make sure that all of these products are going to be made in America, how do we ramp up production of these things when he's already stifled these industries that would produce these things? Like he's even stifled the concrete industry. He stifled the steel industry, even though he said out loud that he was going to help the steel industry many times. So, and I mean, I think probably the largest thing, and this is a personal thought, I'd love to have somebody on that is from the steel industry themselves. The only thing I've really seen kind of make a difference in the steel industry at all was the steel tariffs that we had, which were put on by the previous president, Trump. And go ahead.
That was, hang on, I don't want to say it wrong.
Oh yeah.
I'm wondering what section that was under of the Trade Act, because it's either 20 something or 30 something. I don't remember.
And
it doesn't matter. I think it's 301, but lumber, you want 469.50.
469.50.
Yep.
Yeah. If you go and try to buy a piece of plywood now compared to 2 years ago, you're up hundreds of percentages. It's abhorrent, and people need these building materials to continue housing construction, which he referenced that we need to build more affordable housing. Well, Joe, if it's not affordable to build affordable housing because of the cost of construction materials, how do you propose that we do that? Further subsidies, further increasing inflation? Let's be realistic here. If we're not going to focus on restoring American industry, which he says that's what he wants to do, but it seems as though the focused investments in the fields that we would need for the construction projects that he's actually pushing for, he's not investing in. And that's concerning to me. And after that, he went on to talk about, and this was the crazy thing, right? He went on to say, and we're giving families $1,000 in tax credits for EVs. Listen, Joe, most families can't afford EVs because you're talking about, for a entry level one, about $45,000. Easy in your sleep. Okay, most of them are in the range of $55,000 to $65,000, and again, we're still talking entry level models. We're not talking like a X Speedster or something like that. You know, so $1,000, Joe. What is $1,000 actually going to do as far as a tax credit for the middle class, which you yourself said in your own speech has been hollowed out? I'm not exactly sure what he thinks is going to be done by that, but it's absolutely nothing. He said that he's a capitalist himself. He says that, but he believes that capitalists should pay their fair share. He said billion-dollar companies must pay a minimum of 15%. That's less than nurses pay. That was a quote from him. And that's interesting that he said that, because the companies that he's talking about, he's mentioned also that he wants to close personal tax loopholes. Okay. Now the question is, does that apply to members of Congress? Does that apply to their friends, their families, and the companies that fund them? Like, I don't really understand what he's saying. And being a small business owner, I can tell you that if you've got a minimum tax, and I'm sure that this is going to come up with the European Union, because if he's saying that because when you mention minimum tax at 15%, I'm sure the European Union isn't going to be happy about that. They've already been upset about him with the trade deal with Mexico and Canada that he just re-signed a couple weeks ago. I want to say 2 weeks ago now, maybe. Which don't even get me started on that. But I'm sure we're going to hear from the European Union tomorrow over that. But if they're paying 15%, why can't all Americans pay 15% in taxes? Why isn't that the rate for everyone?
Well, I believe.
Go ahead.
Okay.
There you go.
So something else that I also think contributed is the fact that he mentioned very briefly, he glanced over it, but the student loan forgiveness.
Yes.
In 60 minutes. Timeline and perspective. So in August, he passed the executive order basically forgiving student loans. In September of 2022, he said in 60 minutes, the PHE, or the public health emergency, is now over. So because of that, now under certain federal regulations, you can take certain actions under a public health emergency, whatever the public health emergency is, if it's for the well-being of America. Yes. But the public health emergency was over in September, Joe. You said that on 60 Minutes. So now you're telling me that student loan forgiveness is the best thing? Really? It widened the racial gap up between African Americans 10%. If you want to talk with, my friends over who are Latino, Latina, Hispanic, it widened the racial gap 20% there. So in reality, student loan forgiveness, it's a hoax plan which widens the racial gap up, makes America more poor, and it's not free. It burdens the middle class to pay more taxes for those who end up going to school. How's that right?
It's very interesting. Again, because he said the middle class has been hollowed out, right? So you can't get any more milk from the cow that you've already killed, So, and it's very disappointing because let's talk about the student loan forgiveness for 2 seconds, referencing your point. In your point, I think that this is very important. The fact that most of the student loan forgiveness ends up in the hands of wealthy people, the more affluent individuals who can actually afford to pay their student loans back. Doctors, lawyers, things like this is where there has been a focus of actual loan forgiveness funds. It's very, very interesting and I can't remember who released the report on that. But it was interesting. They had the whole break.
CRS, Congressional Research Service. They're a think tank, bipartisan. They're great. They're fantastic. They develop policy about every single thing. I know what you're talking about. It's CRS.
Yep. Yeah, it's absolutely abhorrent that you present that. And again, it goes to the presentation, right? They tell the American people that it's something good for them when really it's something that's bad for them. But I mean, I guess this is coming from the same people that have told us that all of these wars have been so great for us, And he did reference his forever war, his love for forever wars, and telling Ukraine that we'll be there as long as you need us. Forever, Joe? Forever? Forever is long? What does that even mean? This is the concern that I have greatly about not just our fiscal expenditure, but also our military expenditure. Okay, you're sending all of these military weaponry and tanks now. We're sending tanks over there now, Bradleys and Abrams. It's out of control. Main battle tanks, you know, like it's concerning because the Department of Defense is coming out saying, hey, man, we barely have enough ammunition for live fire exercises, and we're not ready if we have to actually get into a war. So right now, all you've done is made it more difficult for us to defend ourselves or to even honestly protect our interests, okay, in other places. We know that we're on the cusp of a war with Taiwan. Some general the other day said we'll be there by 2025.
Yeah.
I doubt it. I doubt it. And China would be a damn fool if they didn't attack Taiwan in the next 16 months. You know, I think that they'll honestly, knowing China the way that they operate, they'll probably attack Taiwan probably before March of next year. They'll start making big moves in that area. It would behoove them to make really big moves right around the time of the primaries. Honestly, I think that if I was China, the best way to start initiating that would be to and I gotta think of how to word this because of the internet censors, would be to have Kim Jong-un, wait, which one is it? Il-un, whichever, Kim Jong, okay, the son, pass away, and his sister also pass away, and China go into North Korea under the guise of assistance and helping them, and then really taking over that. And while everybody's distracted on what they're doing on the Korean Peninsula, launch an all-out assault on Taiwan. That would be the best plan that I think that they could do. But there's other number of plans that they can do. That's just a thought. But regardless, I believe in the next 16 months we'll see a whole bunch of stuff pop off in the South China Seas.
Well, what's also funny is the whole China balloon incident. I mean, I see a date. It was January 28th.
He talked about it. Go on.
29th, 30th, 31st, February 1st, February 2nd, February 3rd, February 4th. 8 days it took you to do something. 8 days?
Yep.
Are you out of your mind? 8 days?
He referenced it in his speech. He said, we showed so much strength last week in reference to the Chinese balloon and their invasion of what did he say? Something about our sovereignty. Oh my goodness. He said we should work with China where we can, but if they do anything to invade our sovereignty or something like that, I'm paraphrasing, our sovereignty will do what we need to, just like we did with the balloon. Are you serious, Joe? You mean let the balloon complete its whole mission and then and then do something about it? So what, are you gonna allow China to destroy the US and then do something about it, Joe? Whatever do you mean? It was interesting. Moving on from there, another couple of interesting things that he referenced.
Here's the quote.
Oh, you got the quote?
Quote. I just lost it. Hang on a minute. It's gonna. Okay. It's a little bit everywhere, but I'll read a little everywhere. Quote,
that's the way
I will make no apologies that we are investing to make America strong, investing in American innovation in industries that will define the future, and that China's government is intent on dominating. Continues on. Today, we're in the strongest position in decades to compete with China or anywhere else in the world. Continues on. I am committed to work with China where it can advance American interests and benefit the world. But make no mistake, as we made clear last week, if China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did. And let's be clear, winning the competition with China should unite all of us, end quote. Really, Joe? So which
right.
is, and within that little section, he just contradicted himself twice.
Yep.
Twice.
Yep.
So first he starts with, we're going to work with China, and then we mentioned the balloon. By the way, interesting. Mm-hmm. Representative Green ended up bringing a white balloon into the House office building, I thought that was hysterical.
I saw that.
That was
That was crazy.
great.
That was hilarious. What was the quote under it that she said? It's just a balloon.
Right. That was so great.
While playing 99 Luftaloons.
She was
boy,
pissed tonight.
That was because he was lying and she called him out on it. She called him out on. I was yelling at the screen too myself while the thing was going on.
Oh, here we go. And let's be clear. This quote. Winning the competition with China should unite us all of us. We face serious challenges among the world. And then continues on.
Now, this was interesting that he said, and I was like, that sounds insane, Joe. I've never heard of that. And being a person that relies on the supply chain for parts of his businesses, I don't think that this is true at all. Like, you just pulled this out of your nose. He said, I cracked down on foreign shipping to lower the cost of goods. I cut the costs of shipping 90%, helping America farmers, businesses, and consumers. 90% cut shipping costs?
It's like, not that high.
Where the how did he invent teleportation or something? Like, what? How did he do that?
Go to the Ways and Means Committee on the House side. They'll tell you differently.
Yeah. It's interesting that he's able to say this type of stuff and not get called for his BS. Then he goes on to say that let's pass laws to strengthen antitrust to prevent big online platforms from giving their own products an unfair advantage. Okay.
That was ironic too.
I believe in trust busting, but what you've been doing behind the scenes is, well, your administration, not necessarily him as an individual, has been working to cultivate with these social media platforms and big companies a way to further increase influence over the population unduly and unjustly. And it's funny because after that, he goes in to continue to say that, oh, we need to work on the way that the social media platforms manage our data, and we need to have more restrictions on that for both children and for everyone else. And I'm like, but that goes completely against what your administration is currently actively doing.
And that's for the parents to decide, not the government.
The problem is that we don't have anything like, what do you call it? The GRPD. I feel like I put the letters in the wrong order, but it's the European laws where they have the restrictions on the data protections. We don't have anything like that in the US. It's very interesting that he says this on the cusp of America trying to, as the government I'm talking about, trying to continue to increase its influence and data collection on the population through the use of social media platforms. So that, I think, was an out and out falsehood and miscategorization of any of his efforts. After that, crazy enough, he decided that he wanted to talk some more about some other things, and he went on to talk about junk fees. And I agree. I think that this is, if this turns out the way that he claims that it is, I think that it'd be a good idea. However, I have little belief that it will. He said, my administration is taking on junk fees. We're making airlines show you full ticket prices up front, some other stuff. We're reducing bank fees, cutting late fees from $35 to $8. Junk fees might not matter to very wealthy, but it matters to all other people at home. That's fair. That's fair. Let's hope something actually comes of it that doesn't end up biting us in the rear, because a lot of it always ends up doing like that. Then he went on to talk about the hotels and the whole resort fees and stuff like that, which was also, I thought, very interesting. I'm like, I don't think that everybody really has an issue with resort fees. I don't even know what the hell a resort fee is. So I guess I guess it's above my pay grade. Or above my common life experience. Maybe I just don't travel enough to these things to experience that type of pain from those. He went on to talk about how telephone providers can charge up to $200 to change companies, and I agree with him there, especially working in the field for
I did
many years.
too.
Huh?
Oh, I said no, I do too, and
Yeah.
coming off of that social media thing, kind of relating to China too. Everyone's not everyone. A lot of people are up in arms about the whole TikTok thing and about Congress possibly banning it. I
It
don't
should have been banned.
personally.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a problem with it. It has proven to transfer United States data back to China. I mean, so if you work in government on the House or Senate side, because there's two chambers, there was a new resolution passed at the beginning of this Congress saying TikTok cannot be allowed on any House or Senate or any federal government managed device.
Yeah.
So if it's not allowed on a federally controlled device, why should it be on our own personal device? And I don't know the rules. I have not, I will admit, I have not taken a visit to the ethics committee or gone on the ethics committee page to look at Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or any of that. But I would assume, but I guess it's safe to assume it's allowed on a House and Senate device.
Right.
If you're, doing stuff for the member. But putting that aside, if TikTok is not safe to be on a device managed by the federal government, then why is it safe to be on our own personal devices?
That's a very, very fair question. And that's worth the conversation. I was very much for the ban of it when Trump was trying to ban it. I thought that was a fantastic idea because we know that they're actually working very closely with the Chinese military and their intelligence arm. We also know that China controls the algorithm behind it, thereby cultivating and changing the perception of the way that our people think, especially the youth, because it's the youth that are on there largely. And this in and of itself presents an issue. And that's outside of the massive amounts of data that it collects. It can even read your emails and your what do you call it? And track your typing and keystrokes. It can read your internal data, all of your internal data, your pictures, your files, everything. But on top of that, excuse me. But on top of that, they use it for facial recognition. They use it for orientation recognition. They use it for mapping. Okay. These are very serious. And when I say mapping for you guys out there who aren't sure of what I'm talking about, I'm talking about you if you guys have a Roomba or something like that cleans your floors automatically, it maps out your house and it lays out your house into a grid type of a system or whatever the case is. But what TikTok does is it maps out the areas in which you're taking your videos of. And it's very, very concerning. And these are only a couple of things. So there's much more into that. But TikTok is a extreme large threat for many various reasons. He also went into, and I'd like to move forward a little bit with this so we can catch up with some other stuff. He talked about non-compete agreements, and then he referenced cashiers at burger joints having non-compete agreements.
Oh, don't even get me started.
Which that isn't a thing, Joe. That isn't a thing. That hasn't been a thing for some times. When it was a thing, it wasn't even popular and it wasn't able to be enforced. We already know this as a fact. Also, somebody coming from that background working in that industry, I can tell you for sure. Okay, I do both business development and business coaching. So I've had multiple clients that have or run those type of stores or businesses, even working with franchises. And I can tell you for a fact that is not accurate information. Those things are not enforceable. And no, they are not using those at those type of places, Joe. You know, but it's interesting because he says non-compete agreements are a very large issue. But my concern more so would be is getting people the education and the ability to go into the industries in which the non-competes are most highly impactful, which are the more high-paying industries. And he made a reference to education, saying that 12 years of education is not enough. First of all, the 12 years of education that we get in the United States of America is absolutely trash. And I'm actually pretty sure that it's 14 years, but I'd have to really run some numbers in my head real quick. But it's more than just 12 years. I know that for a fact. But maybe he was mentioning the 12 grades. I think that's what he was trying to say. And then he referenced how we need to start universal pre-K for nationwide, which is concerning because I'm not a fan of the expansion of the Board of Ed anywhere in the country. I don't like them having their hands in preschool. I don't like it, not even one bit. He talked about increasing Pell Grants and stuff like that. One positive thing he said in reference there that I did like was, let's connect students to jobs in high school and give them 2 years of free community college. I'm going to leave alone the fact that in most states now, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, so I don't want to give faulty information, but in most states now, they do have some sort of arrangement where you can get 2 years of community college free. But I mean, I like that idea, and I definitely agree with you giving high school students a connection in high school to jobs. But again, that goes back to education. I've got a whole plan on that specifically, actually. I've talked about it multiple times, but that's not what this specific video is on. But yeah, that is a very good idea. But if we don't fix the education system while you're trying to expand the education system and you don't fix the parts that we have now, how can you possibly think that this is going to be something that ends up being effective, implementable, or even successful, which is my larger concern there? I don't know. He moved on after that to talk about the COVID deaths are down 90%, and this goes back to what you were talking about earlier. And soon we'll end the pandemic health emergency, and that will be May 11th for you guys that haven't been keeping up with the news. But he's already said that it's been over multiple times. It's not the first time that he said that out loud. It was interesting because after that portion, he went in to talk about public safety. And public safety, here's a quote: public safety depends on public trust. And then he had Tyree Nichols' family there and had them stand up, using them as show figures and stuff like that as these props. And I found that to be egregiously disrespectful, because right after that, he went into talking about how Black people have to have these conversations with their children about how to interact with the police and stuff like that. And they shouldn't have to have those conversations because of the way that it was extremely frustrating and very upsetting for me personally. Not because he mentioned that Black people have to have those types of conversations, but because he tried to use it as, and I hate this, he tried to use us Black people as props, and he does this continually. He believes that he is the arbiter of Blackness. He told us that we're not Black if we don't vote for him. You ain't Black. Who the hell is this guy? Well, he's one of the, he's the last of the, proudly the last of the Dixiecrats, right? But we won't go into him and his continued racist history. But it just shows how he'll talk about stuff that he knows nothing about, and he'll use minorities or Blacks or Latinos as scapegoats for his policies that are unfortunately adversely impacting the same populations that he's saying that he's trying to work with. Now, it's interesting. It's interesting that he did that, because this is a guy who also pushed for defunding of the police, even though the last couple of months he's been saying, oh, I never did that. Except you did, Joe. You did. You might not have any memory of what you did 5 seconds ago, but we do. And the interesting thing with that was, my concern is the push for defunding the police has drastically decreased the standards of hiring processes, because it's become more difficult for them to hire people. So they've lowered the standards. They've also lowered the standards in many fire departments. And I hear these complaints from fire departments and police all across the country that is a very serious issue. And that's not just in Rochester, that's outside of Rochester too. The lowering of the standards is a very serious problem. They've actually said that they believe that played a large part in the Tyrese Nichols incident. I do not know enough about the specific background of the hiring of those specific officers to make a comment on that, but it has been brought up. After that, that's when he went into his BS on the guns and stuff, and he said that we've passed the most sweeping gun safety laws in 3 decades. Not gun safety, Joe. Not gun safety at all.
Gun restricting.
Yes. Second Amendment theft. You know, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Let's see. We got something else here that he said. We talked about the pathway to citizenship. We talked about the Ukraine thing. Oh yeah, he did mention say one thing that was really, really weird, right? Really weird, and didn't seem to attach to anything else that he was talking about at the time, and made no sense in general. He said, name me one world leader who is switched in places with Xi Jinping. Name me one.
Mm-hmm.
What even was he talking about? What even was he referencing? I don't even know. I don't know that he knows. But I would love to hear that complete thought that he had, because it very clearly was not, whatever was going on in his head didn't get out his mouth to get to us, to make us be able to understand what the hell he was talking about there. This was an interesting thing he mentioned about the VA. He said, we were losing 25 veterans a day from suicide. Now we're only losing 17 a day. And while I think that is very good progress, it is only a small number. But the way in which he presented it, I think, was a little inappropriate. Let me say it like that. I think that's the nicest, best word I can use for that, because it made it seem like 17 people a day from the armed services and veteran services committing suicide was okay. That's a fantastic number. And I just, for the life of me, that really irked my nerves. I don't know if any of you guys out there that irked you, but let me know in the comments how you felt about that part. He went on to talk about his cancer moonshot. Now, I don't know if you remember when he was vice president, excuse me. When he was vice president, he started a cancer moonshot. He said in 10 years, they were going to eliminate cancer. Now, this is probably over 12 years ago now. It's crazy, right? So he's like, well, we just restarted the cancer moonshot, and let me make sure I make the quote right. And in another 25 years, we'll lower the number of cancer deaths by 50%. 25 years, Joe? First of all, I don't consider 25 years a moonshot, okay? Definitely not, okay? But 25 years, you're only going to get it down 50%, when you told me 12 years ago you're going to get it eliminated in 10 years. How am I supposed to believe anything that you say in relation to that? In relation to this issue that affects so many Americans, unfortunately, largely because of the chemicals that are in our food, that are in our water, that are in our air, that you allow to continuously be there. And it's interesting, right? Because I'm all for deregulation. But we know that many of these toxic, hazardous, harmful chemicals are in all of the production materials. I'll give you a great example. The chickens and the eggs, right? The chicken farmers found out that the eggs weren't being produced because of the food that the chickens were being fed. Could you imagine how much more so the food and stuff impacts us? And now we've got all of these low birth rates, and we've got the lowest fertility rate in the history of man. That's not a joke, you guys. You can go look that up. We currently have the lowest fertility rate in the history of humanity. We have some serious issues that we need to look at. And in relation to that, I'll mention Chuck Schumer. After Chuck Schumer spending 2 years telling us how great abortion was and that we should kill all our babies, the next day after the election last year, he said that we need to legalize all the illegal immigrants because we're not having enough babies. I said, you know what, Chuck? If I could get my hands on you, I'd give you a nice slap, because for 2 years you told us to kill all our children, and now you want to make it so that we make all of these people citizens because you're saying we're not having enough children. Really? This is how these people think. It's very, very different than real life human beings. The funny thing was, he did give credit to George Bush on the great work that he did during the HIV epidemic, which Fauci was in charge of, which he killed and hurt a whole bunch of people in relation to, because Fauci is a less than optimal, has less than optimal moral standards in which we would hold morality in being, and has been less than truthful about many things. He really botched the response to HIV and AIDS originally, and that was a big thing. They hauled him in front of Congress back then about the whole mishandling of that. Let me see. He brought up some interesting things. One interesting thing that was close to the end of the speech that most concerned me was when he alluded to the illegal Canadian hippie pro-alphabet sex slave that attacked Nancy Pelosi's husband. When he alluded to that, he went on to talk about, he said, you must not give hate and extremists any safe harbor. Okay. But what the guy did was something completely separate from anything in relation to January 6th. So now my concern there is that you're talking about you want to make stronger laws in reference to this and stuff. That to me sounds extremely dangerous. That sounds to me like anybody that speaks up against the government is going to get disappeared. Okay. That sounds to me like you're going to continue to limit what people can say, censor them, monitor them, and limit their ability to participate in society. Because if you deem that what they believe is not right, or label extremists, because like he's done lately, he calls them extremist MAGA Republicans, which I don't even understand what specifically that means. I don't understand the problem with the concept of making America great again. I don't understand the issue with that. As he mentioned himself, we are 13 in the world in infrastructure, and we used to be number 1. We're 13. He said it twice, so I had to say it twice. But, you know, and then if we look at education, how far down we are on the education line, you know, it's absolutely ridiculous. So making America great again, I think, is a very good goal to actually go for, because we need to be number 1 again. We used to be number 1 in most of the categories in the world, and right now we are not. So it's interesting that he tried to use the terms extremist in relation to these things, which he did not define, which he did not clarify, and he compared 2 completely separate, unrelated issues trying to say that both these things are extremist events, and neither one of them are extremist events. We can go into as to why, okay? The lack of weapons. Nobody had any weapons at January 6th. Oh boy, but we can't talk about that. Or the fact that this guy hit Paul Pelosi with a hammer. That was Paul's hammer. You understand? It's very, very interesting, the wording and the phrasing that's used. And I always am very careful and very attentive and listen very hard to the words in which they use to explain their thoughts, because they will use that rhetoric in the future. And when it's this type of rhetoric, when it's an open rhetoric talking about extremism without specifically saying what you're labeling as extremism, which in this case would be January 6th and the Paul Pelosi attack, which isn't even really an attack. That's a dispute. Okay. That's a lover's quarrel. Okay. I don't know the complete depths of whatever their relationship was with the three of them together. And I won't comment on their specific sexual relationship and the nature of what it was, because there are many forms and agreements of different sexual preferences and relationships. And I that's not my business. That's your personal business in your own house. Okay. But to say that that was extremism is concerning. I don't know. What are your thoughts on him saying that we should give hate no harbor, which is another thing, because now they're considering all types of things hate, which none of us normal folks would actually consider hate. What is your thought on him saying that we must give hate and extremism no safe harbor without him telling us what that actually is?
That is completely uttermost broad. He is I nickname him the broadest president, because a lot of things he says are extremely broad. He doesn't go into specific details. He talks in very generalized statements. And the thing with this president is, on top of his incompetence, is his inability to be able to specify a lot of the times what he means by certain phrases. And unfortunately, that is what he fails to do, and still to this day. And if you ask me if that includes in his incompetence, I'm going to tell you absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here with us tonight. What were any additional takeaways that you got from the State of the Union, if we didn't cover them already?
I would say the bottom line is the economy is failing. Crime is up. We need new leadership. Under the Biden-Harris administration, things have been only worse. We need a Republican president to take over in 2024. And I have, with everything in my mind, that it's going to happen. And I hope it does.
Lord willing. I agree with that. And I hope we get the right candidate to run that's actually going to stand up for what needs to be done in our country, as far as standing up for our constitutions, our rights, our liberties, and our freedoms, because that's really been where most of the detrimental government the detrimental nature of the government's policies have come in, where they start restricting our constitutional rights and liberties. You can almost legitimately trace all of the failures of the current government back to them limiting those. And that in and of itself should just go to show what a great document the Constitution is and has been. I was very happy to see that the Republicans the other day, it was either the other day or today, they actually read out loud the Constitution, okay, of the United States on the House floor. And that was awesome. That was absolutely awesome. I was so glad that they did that. I hope that some of the Democrats, after hearing what is actually in the Constitution, understand more of what the Constitution is, which they all took a oath to uphold, and they start upholding the Constitution. Because the fact of the matter is most of the Democrats that are out here in society today do not agree with the policies that are being forced upon them because it's adversely impacting them. They too see restrictions on their freedoms and liberties happening. You wouldn't believe how many Democrats that I talk to that say that they get censored on social media, you know? And it's very concerning that I don't see enough Democrats in the Democratic Party standing up, and I would encourage them to do so, because we've seen Republicans stand up repeatedly for our liberties and freedoms, but the Democrats say that they care about the people and their freedoms as well, but we don't actually see that in action. And when you have leaders both in the House and the Senate that are Democrats that push policies that are completely counter to what the Constitution is about, and then you have the White House also doing the same, also Democrat, it's up to the Democrats that are the people, that are the common everyday citizens, to stand up to these people, because those are their representatives. We, as being Republicans, have actually stood up in the issues that we believe are being restricted by our government. And we've also stood up to Republicans that we believe are being restrictive to our constitutional rights in our government. And I applaud everybody that is standing up in the Republican Party, working hard to bring us back to our roots and actually stand up for our rights, liberties, and freedoms. And that is going to be what will be the driver for us going forward. If we can focus on that moving forward to 2024, I believe we will have a massive successful year for Republicans. And we've got so many other issues aside from just that to speak on and propose adjustments to, because that's what we really need to make sure we're doing. Whenever we talk on these issues, we need to make sure that we're presenting actual solutions that are not only solutions, but actually implementable. So, yeah, that's where I am. I appreciate having you on tonight, Josh.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, yes. You're very, very welcome. You're welcome back anytime in the future.
Perfect. Perfect. Perfect.
All right, you guys. So my final thoughts on the State of the Union is we've got a ton of work to do. Now, while I am very, very, very positive in outlook of the direction that we could possibly go in, if it'll be up to us as individuals to stand up, speak up, and not shut up about the things that are important, the kitchen table items that we experience every day in life, the issues that are most impacting us, because it is very clear by this address that was given today by Joe Robinette Biden saying out of his mouth that the state of our union is good, is completely out of touch from reality. We are not good. There is no part of our country that you would define as being good. So unless you're wealthy, unless you have all these beach houses and different places to go and stuff like that, I mean, then maybe. But I know a lot of people who are considerably wealthy that are not very happy about the way things are going. So the state of our union is in need of improvement, under construction, right? Let's work on it together. Let's build this thing up. Let's return America to the #1 position in manufacturing, in education, in quality of life, and in freedom and rights. You guys be blessed, be well. I'll catch you all later.